All right, folks, how you doing? Welcome back. So this is the Judaic colony at Aberdeen, part two. Disclaimer: under Section 107 of the Copyright Act 1976, allowance is made for fair use for purposes such as criticism, comment, news reporting, teaching, scholarship, and research. Once again, this is a summarized version of when Scotland was Jewish, and you'll see the links in the description below. Medieval Aberdeen. So the book now shifts to those living in Aberdeen from the 13th century on. There are aristocratic families in and around Aberdeen who likely had Jewish blood, including the Gordons, Forbeses, Fesleys, and Frasers, who came to Scotland between the 11th and 13th centuries. The 15th to 16th centuries saw more families enter the area with French and Sephardic last names, such as Menzies, Davidson, Arnott, and Perry. There were also clans whose surnames were based on the Hebrew alphabet, such as Gemel, Camel, Hay, Life, and Tau or Tau, Saltire. Elgin. In Elgin, God's Spirit in Aramaic, we find a list of provosts, mayors, beginning in the 13th century with a Wisman and a string of Douglases from the 15th to 16th centuries. A gardener then makes the list and then alternates between Innes, Douglas, and Anand. In the 17th century, Pringle, or Pringle, it's just the same, slightly different spelling, enters the list, along with several Hays and Seatons. Seaton coat of arms. The surname Hay comes from the Hebrew Hech, symbolizing number 5 and life. It is Hayat in Arabic, and the Seaton coat of arms shows 3 orange crescent moons. The Elgin Burgess roll shows a considerable Jewish and Islamic presence, including Sephardic surnames such as Arnott, Baron, Bracco, Cadell, Livy, Martine, Mason, or is it Mason or Masson? I'm not sure. Morris, Perry, and Troop. To become a Burgess. So, in order to become a Burgess, one had to have strong socio-economic and political standing, as the position was typically passed down through inheritance from father to son or through marriage to the daughter of a Burgess. In Aberdeen, throughout the 17th century, there are names which seem Sephardic, Franco-Jewish, or Islamic in origin. The University of Antioch, so both male and female Colombians were mapped genetically by researchers at the University of Antioch. 16% were found to have Semitic blood, including the Cohen priest class haplotype. Jewish names in the Spanish Inquisition records and those found in the Aberdeen Burgess and Merchant records are considered by the authors of the book to have been far too commonplace to be coincidental. Around half the surnames in the documents and listings examined by the authors were either Franco-Jewish, Sephardic, or Islamic. Yell Cemetery. The Orkneys also come under scrutiny as the Sinclair Templar family ruled those islands, according to the book. Just one problem, though: the Yell Cemetery is in the Shetland Islands, not the Orkney Islands. But anyway, leaving that to one side. So the Yell Cemetery lends proof of this, as it is thought to be named after the Hebrew Jehiel, I think that's how you pronounce it, God lives. Orkney surnames listings lend further proof with the likes of Anal, Arnott, Esson, Gorey, Leon, Davy, Gullion, Holland, Huri, or Huri, I don't know how you pronounce that, and Osmond. Howry? Maybe Howry. The book claims that the preconceived notion that northern Scotland is peopled primarily by Viking ancestry may be a false one, and that Norse genes are actually quite sparse. Yeah, but the trouble is the Yell Cemetery is not in the Orkneys, it's in the Shetlands. So, bit of an oversight there. There is a difference between those two. There might be a little bit of a discrepancy between the Orkneys and the Shetlands in terms of how much Viking blood is in each of the two sets of islands, because they're not the same thing. But I get what they're trying to go with it. A massive centre of international trade. So the Jews turned Aberdeen into a massive centre of international trade from the 13th century onwards. And in the 15th century, the town traded with the Netherlands, Danzig, and Poland. After the arrival of Sephardic Jews from Spain and Portugal, a lot of trade was established in Poland, including with both cloth mills and sugar refineries. Scottish trading communities also existed in places such as Bruges, Middelburg, and Camp Vere. Sir Thomas Isaac. So Aberdonian shipping families included the Cullens, Blindsillies, I don't know how you pronounce that name, Rattrays, Fidesis, and Pratts. The wealthiest merchants were Andrew Cullen and Andrew Buck, with Cullen becoming the mayor or the provost twice in the early 16th century. Bishop Elphinstone also traded overseas. I've covered him before. When King's College was under construction, he traded in wool, trout, salmon, money, and even gunpowder. King David II established a mint in Elgin for coin production, and his sister Matilda married Sir Thomas Isaac, an Aberdonian burgess. Clan Menzies. In the early 15th century, the Menzies established themselves, and the Chalmerses, also known as Cameron or Chambers from Chamberlain, were also a very powerful family. The Menzies became the dominant power in Aberdeen for the next 2 centuries. They went on to rub shoulders with the high nobility in Aberdeen and even became acquainted with Scotland's royal family. Clan Skene. So the Bannermans were also amongst Aberdeen's top families, as an Alexander Bannerman became the personal physician to King David II. John Barber, or Berber, became Aberdeen's archdeacon in the 14th century. He was described as a scholar, businessman, priest, poet, and historian. He also audited the king's accounts. The Skene family, who operated linen factories and sugar mills in Poland, enjoyed great prestige also. Gilbert Skene became physician to King James IV. He also wrote the first book on medicine in Scotland. Leghorn, Italy. So prior to this, Bernard Gordon wrote a treatise on medicine in the 14th century, which was still being used in Salerno, Italy, a century later. Patrick Gordon taught Hebrew at Marischal University in Aberdeen in the 17th century, and Thomas Gordon made frequent trips to Leghorn, Italy, around the same time period, which was the centre of a gems and metals trade as far east as India. John Burnet, another Aberdonian, prospered in the tobacco trade with Virginia and Maryland. And again, it's amazing how often Virginia comes up in these presentations. Maybe need to look into that more deeply. So Robert Gordon, a wealthy Scottish merchant in Danzig, bequeathed Aberdeen £10,000 to establish a school for impoverished boys. Again, this is where I say the authors have missed the boat completely with Edinburgh, because then looking at the George Heriot School in Edinburgh, it's the same kind of story. Very, very similar. Anyway, William Gordon became Doctor of Medicine at King's College for 8 years and also served as business manager for the school. Some of the Aberdonian families of Jewish blood were known to engage in smuggling, as Alexander and Robert Gordon were known to supply a John Stewart of Inverness with contraband liquor and salt. Virginia tobacco trade. I forgot about this slide. And Andrew Cruikshank, John Sutherland, and Alexander Brodie reportedly smuggled tobacco from Virginia to Aberdeen during the American War of Independence. According to the authors, these Aberdonian trading families maintained socio-economic ties with their ancestral families who had remained behind in France and other crypto-Jewish communities across Europe. Sephardic trade connections. So these connections ranged from Scandinavia, the Netherlands, France, Spain to Italy, as each country had its share of Sephardic crypto-Jews following the Inquisition. Each location had relatives now settled in and around Aberdeen, and these trading houses only ever traded with other Jewish-owned businesses. The book states, again, this is the book saying this, not me, Scottish Jews also had ties to Russia, both militarily and commercially, throughout the 17th and 18th centuries. According to the book, Russia was highly accommodating of Jews from other countries at the time, including Poland, Hungary, and Germany. This was because they were attempting to internationally expand their economy. Well, makes sense, really, doesn't it? The Gordons and Davidsons sent some of their leading family members to Russia. In the case of the Davidsons, they later became known throughout Russia as the Davidovs, interestingly. So, yeah, hope you've enjoyed this presentation. Thank you very much for listening. It's a bit of a minor thing, but how minor really is it? The whole Yale Cemetery thing, it's not in the Orkneys, it's in the Shetlands. It's not the same because I've been to both the Orkney Islands and the Shetland Islands in the past. It seems like a minor thing, but it's not really so minor. You should do your research properly. But it is what it is. Anyway, thanks for listening.